actually did do this. I picked cotton from the time I was 12 years old until I left for Tuskegee for college when I was 17. This was how we earned our money, picking cotton, $3 a day. And this is the hardest work I know, pulling these bowls off of these stalks, bending your back. Your neck feels like it's breaking, the hot sun beaming down. It's very difficult to get this cotton out of these bowls. They prick your hands till your fingers bleed. And that is my background growing up in Preston, Oklahoma. My only contact with whites were when they threw rocks at us and called us nigger when we were walking to school, past the white school, to a little two-room school. And I have all that in my book. But I learned some of the best lessons I ever had here, and that's why I call it links in my black family support system. The two-room school, the little outhouse that looks like it's falling down. Actually, it did fall down in 1979, but I got this picture before it fell. And some people told me, I'm so glad you put that picture in, because to me, segregation was just a word. But reading Miss Lucy's Cookies has made people understand what it was like. And also the church, this little church, Little Jerusalem Baptist Church, which still stands, which beckoned us to Sunday school where we learned great lessons. I could read and write before I went to school. That was the kind of community I grew up in. And I heard these stories about people coming to Oklahoma, as he mentioned, that it's going to be a promised land. Black people needed that promised land more than any others. In fact, my own maternal grandparents came from Sulphur Springs, Texas. They were descendants of slaves who worked the Brazos Bottom plantations near Dallas. My grandfather witnessed the lynching of his best friend by Klansmen in 1918. He and his friend were just riding through, had done nothing wrong, but the Klan was mad and they were going to make an example of the first blacks they saw. Just like that crazy group in Los Angeles nearly beat this white man to death because they wanted to just make an example. My grandfather and this man had done nothing wrong. They just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were riding horses through thickets, and the Klan saw only one. My grandfather held back, was very quiet, didn't make a sound, and he saw them string up and lynch his best friend. If they had known he was hiding, he would have been lynched also. When the Klan left, my grandfather went home, gathered up his family, and said, "We're going to Oklahoma. I cannot stay another day in Texas." And he didn't. They came to Oklahoma, where they had some relatives who had heard it was the promised land. And my grandfather never set foot in Texas again. That incident made him a bitter man. He never liked whites from that on, never trusted them, didn't trust God. He never set foot in a church. My grandmother, very religious, all the children religious. But my grandfather didn't believe there could be a God that would let things like that happen. So it really ruined his life. I have always heard that kind of history. My other set of grandparents came with a caravan of 13 blacks out of Lott, Texas, a little place near Marshall. The Powells were in that group, and I see my dear friend Rosemary, who taught with me at Edison. Her family was one of the families in that wagon train. My grandmother told me how the men would get whatever they'd eat that night was what the men would shoot that day. Whatever they came across, squirrel, rabbit, raccoon, possum, and of course they had dry goods with them. And if they come across fruit, there were orchards of trees, they would have that fruit. And at night they would make their beds underneath the wagons or in the wagons, spread quilts over saplings. And I just sat as a little girl hearing those stories, and I loved history. And I've been reading and writing ever since. And I wrote these two books because I wanted our story told. It hasn't been told properly yet, but it's a lot better than it used to be. It used to be we were not even mentioned. I taught history 22 years at Edison High School, and the books I taught Oklahoma history from did not mention, had a paragraph on Tulsa, didn't mention the race riot at all. Perhaps the most single significant event that ever happened in this state was not mentioned at all. So I wrote my own history books. And I was teaching during the time when multiculturalism was at least getting recognized. But still, to this day, people view multicultural or diversity or learning about others, what I call the castor oil theory. And when I talk to groups, and I talk all the time to little 5-year-olds on the floor, to 100-year-olds in a senior citizens home, but my story is always the same. I use wit and humor and my love of history, my love of people of all races, and the need for diversity. It is not like castor oil. Now, when I was a little girl, Grandma used to give us all a dose of castor oil in the spring, like clockwork. She said our blood was thick and we needed purifying and cleaning out, and it was going to taste nasty going down, but it would make us feel better in the long run. That's the way people view diversity. Businesses will call out the diversity expert after someone has filed a harassment suit or a bias suit, and they'll have all kind of works. I've attended some. My husband works for PSO. I went to some, and they'll bring in the police commissioner, and it's like the castor oil theory. You know, it's not going to be pleasant, but it might do a little bit of good. Actually, I find diversity just fascinating, and the way I learned to love people, not to see color, but to see people, is when my husband, I went to Tuskegee, that's me at 17 at Tuskegee, worked my way through college, Booker T. Washington's home right there. And I had to learn to get away from Oklahoma, that there was another world. Married my husband, who graduated from Tuskegee, got his second lieutenant bars, and there began the 12 moves in 14 years, 5 babies, 4 born in England. And I had to learn to love and trust other people. I was not in Oklahoma anymore. I was not with this little small black community that had nurtured me. My husband was an officer. Often we were the only blacks in his squadron. Sometimes the only black in this particular housing area. Or in England, we'd be the only black in this whole little town, like we were in a little London suburb. And so I had to learn to love and trust people, and it's the best thing that ever happened. I totally knew that that castor oil theory was not right, that it is fun, it is helpful, it is godlike, it is democratic for all of us to love each other and to get along. And so that is why I wrote these 2 books. I'll get back, I want to give others time, but I do want to get back and tell you a little bit about the 2 books, a little bit more. This one is about the black pioneers, and I was supposed to have some come today, but he's